The OCGFAM show is back. Surprise! Hey there! Bob from Oregon's call. I'm back. I don't want to talk about it. I just, existential crisis. Wondered where the show was going. Wanted to figure it out. Think I got it figured out. Let's just get into it. So it's on. So when we made the feed chart and then we made the new feed chart, we were talking about pH is critical. That's the whole freaking chart in my mind, is that pH is critical. But the pH is critical. You can't keep that pH where you need to without understanding some of the alkalinity. Am I correct there?
Well, in a sense. I mean, pH is critical, meaning you can't feed a plant with a 5.7 pH and have the calcium load nutrition being what you're feeding your plant. So pH is critical. However, the biggest problem with most people right now in our industry or with our product line is if they're in a place where they're using reverse osmosis, they're using distilled water, they're using some form of broken water, everything looks great through the vegetation period because their soil's still built, still has the calcium in it, still has oyster shell, still has calcium or whatever, carbonate.
Yeah.
But then they go into bloom, their RO water has depleted all of that calcium out of their potting soil, and then in turn, they start to slowly drift into the lower pH. Then everybody has that problem and they blame, well, the nutrition's giving me this issue, the soil's giving me this issue. Everybody wants to blame one of these things when all reality is because we've stripped all the calcium carbonate out of our mixes, no matter what we're using, whether it's one shot to the basic 4 nutrition. If your water is stripping calcium from your potting soil, you're going to be acidic by the time you get into the bloom stage. And if you're acidic going into the bloom stage, then you're spending weeks trying to get yourself back together or a high enough pH for the plants to eat. And if you're doing that, you're not buffering the soil back up because you're either overshooting your pH to try to correct the soil pH, so now your food's not available, or you're feeding it what the plants can eat, but your soil's not buffering, so the pH is going to continue to die. So, to me, like the very first, like if we're going to start all over on how nectar works, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we're going to start off with, what's your water source? Before you add Zeus, Herc, and Gaia, what is your water? Let's start with your water. Now, I can't put that on a feeding schedule because it'd be this thick, it'd be its own Bible. If your water starts at this and this and this, then you need this, this, and this. But we need to know if your water is 7.9, you are going to be just fine. As far as you're going to have the calcium, you're going to have the alkalinity, nothing's going to strip it out of there. Unless your water is 7.9 with 550 parts per million, you obviously can't use that. Or if your water is 7.9, comes from a well, goes through a water softener with sodium carbonate, now your ppms are 470 parts per million, and your plants are yellow because they're locking out from the sodium carbonate, which is a water softener, which gives you a lot of alkalinity, which is great on this meter, but crappy on the parts per million meter, if that makes any sense.
So how many kinds of water are there?
Infinite. I mean, how many
are there
types of people are there?
Are there categories?
It's just in the state of Oregon. My water here at this facility versus my retail store versus your house versus my well on my hill versus my neighbor's well on the other side of the hill. We all have different water.
So it's what's in the water or not in the water.
Literally, and if your water is so bad you don't feel you can use it, and you have to use reverse osmosis distilled or rain, that's all fine and dandy, but you have to remember there's nothing in that. So when water passes over organic matter, passes over mineral, passes over calcium, it's going to hydrolyze those depending on your water source. If it's rainwater, it's acidic. Acidic rainwater is going to hydrolyze limestone. Limestone becomes calcium bicarbonate, which then becomes pH in the soil as it's being deposited. So it keeps your soil pH nice and even while creating a high alkalinity. Now, my house, I have a well. And in my well, because it's super hard, I have a well softener. And the well softener is sodium carbonate, which is a salt calcium. That sucks for growing because it's just adding pure salts into my potting soil. So my alkalinity's there, but now my parts per million are way too high, and it's no nutrition in that salt. It's just calcium salt. So I can't use my well. I have to use rainwater, and I have to add more carbonate into my potting soil, or I have to rebuild my water with a calcite filter.
Is it just minerals that we're dealing with in the water, or are there other things?
Oh, there's a lot of things. I mean, if you live on the flats and the valleys near farmlands, there's all sorts of nitrates, phosphates from over agricultural uses of fertilizers. If you near farmlands like cows and like chickens, pigs, cows, and alpaca, you can have fecal matter, you can have E. coli, you can have, water is a fragile thing, and it's very different on every platform.
So we've been growing for a decade or more now, and it's been working okay. Is most water okay?
Well, absolutely, but like I said, you can't put out a feeding schedule that says, here's how you grow with nectar. I mean, you may do that with all these other a lot of nutritional programs aren't relying on the calcium driving force, the battery that is calcium for us. They don't rely on that, so they don't care if their pH is 5.4 up to 6.1. They're making things available because on the NPK scale, or if you look at the little availability scale of how nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all that crap works, 5.6 to 6.1, most of your stuff is in that range.
Yeah.
We're all calcium. That's way up on this other end of that. And for that to work, you can pH everything to 6.3, 6.4 with our nutrition, but if your water is entering in and robbing your soil because it's 6.3, 6.3 is acidic. No matter how you look at it, 7 is neutral. Anything below that is acid. Anything above that is alkaline. So if you're watering 6.3 Roman feed into your potting soil and you had limestone in there, that 6.3 is reducing the limestone, hydrolyzing the carbonate into a bicarbonate, and the plant's absorbing that as energy. And that's great. However, if you don't have that continuously replenishing or enough of a stockpile in that potting medium, by the time you get into flowering, generally we see most aggressive growing plants about second to third week, they take a face dive, and it's because their pH it's 5.9, 5.8, 5.6, and then they just stop eating nectar. Now they just want veg and bloom because that's where the phosphates and nitrates would be available.
So what are we doing about it?
Well, I mean, there's answering a lot of damn emails going, here's your problem, and RO, and distilled, and this is this, that, and the other. I've been given down to earth a crap ton of business with go out and find this particular limestone product because they're the only ones that have taken the same source we use and have reboxed it into their garden line. Garden lime, by the way, there's 3 products they sell: gypsum, dolomite, and garden lime. Do not buy dolomite, do not buy gypsum. They do not fix your problem, what we're looking at. They're going to add sulfur and magnesium with a calcium back. We just want the calcium carbonate from limestone. So their garden lime is what you want to go to. The only reason why I really bring up them, they use Calpril, is what I always promote. So their Calpril, they just box down in usable packages because Calpril doesn't make small package. And they're distributed through the main distributors across the country, so it's pretty easy to find them in a garden center, a box store, and a hydro shop. So Down to Earth is a locally owned Oregon company, and they're great people, and you can get that product. I recommend that product to anybody who's on the East Coast right now because they can't find my calcium carbonate from limestone in most stores. So anybody can find a Down to Earth product on the East Coast. Assuming our water's not poisoned, there's not poo in it or something, does this fix the problem? Well, no, we're not. I mean, again, we need the questions are, if your water is coming out of the tap at 7.9, 102 parts per million, that's beautiful water. But your alkalinity is probably 240 parts per million. Okay. And if your alkalinity is 240 parts per million, now you're going to be on the opposite end of this issue, where that water is going to be depositing the excess alkalinity into the potting mix. The plant can only absorb so much. That's why we were kind of aiming for that like 100 to 130 range. That seemed to keep the soil pH at a perfect range. The plants really absorb all of that 120 to 130 range beautifully, but without depleting the pH. If you're at 300 parts per million of alkalinity in your potting or in your water source, which like in Southern Oregon or San Luis Obispo or Santa Cruz, California, some parts of Northern Michigan, I'm finding out, that excess that your plant's not using and absorbing will and can deposit into the potting soil, and that will slowly increase your pH. And then we have a whole different problem of getting your pH into like the 7.3, 7.4 range, and that's a problem because your plants don't want to eat up that high either. So in those instances, carbonated water flush, something to hydrolyze, getting rid of that excess alkalinity in this mix without just shocking them with a phosphoric acid pH down flush.
Okay. So we need to do a class on water.
Well, and basically, I think what we need to do is, get somebody on the Nectar book team together and say, all right, let's put this reference down. If your water falls in these parameters, there's a good chance, it's not science, but it's a good chance you will need to do this. If your water falls in these parameters, you should be doing this. Creating a new guideline for folks who aren't just wanting to just take a 4-part, put it in potting soil and hope for the best. Because you're going to do fine with our line that way. We're going to be able to work you through most of the issues. But what we're really trying to do is get everybody to just be so blown away, so happy, and make this thing so bulletproof. And the only way to do that is to just keep scratching away at this calcium service. We've been working with calcium. Frank's been working for calcium companies for 25, 30 years. I've been working with calcium lines with Frank for 20 years. We understand calcium, we understand bicarbonates, we understand alkalinity, but it's not a just turnkey, everybody has the same exact fuel for their same car. It's so slightly different across the board. I hate just putting out blanket statements for everyone to just follow. Like when we first started doing the calcite charger thing, we sold a crap ton of calcite chargers for people who couldn't even use them because their water pH was 8.4. And it was like, whoa, dial it back. Nobody buy calcite chargers. Let's figure out what you have. If your water's 5.5, get a calcite charger. Things would be magical for you. If your water's 7.9, but you need alkalinity, then you have to take these other steps to get that. And that would be, here's your calcite charger, here's your CO2 reactor, here's all the things that can bring your water pH down before they go through here. There's a lot more steps to it. So, unfortunately, it's holding hands and getting people through all the steps to make sure that they're getting the right thing for their water source. And I think if we had a simple graph, there's nothing simple about it. Again, it's like, here's the graph, this big, that explains your water. If we had something that was just very, point 1 to 3, do this, 3 to 5, do this, 5 to 10, do this. And I think that would be a good start for a lot of these people, is doing an episode on, hey, we're going to talk to those guys out there with well waters who, have high pH in your well water. And we can just kind of break that well water down for them,
Are there the 3 meters, ppm, pH, and alkalinity? Are those the 3 factors? If you measure those 3 factors, are you good to go?
And
do you have to?
No, honestly, that's a tough question. We can get away without the parts per million piece.
Yeah.
And really, we can equate often from the pH of the water, whether or not you're hard water or soft water, or you have, and then usually the question is, do you have white flecks on your mirrors or rusty toilets? And those I can usually pick where it's coming from, and then, but a ppm and a pH meter for sure are ideal for slurry tests, because if I know your parts per million are high in your potting soil and you don't give me a slurry, I'm going to say you're acidic. Because if you're high, that means, to me, because you're not giving me the information, so I'm guessing like all the rest of us jerks, but if your pH starts to nosedive, your parts per million are going to start to rocket because they're not eating. So you're giving them a bunch of nutrition. The pH is so whacked out of whack that they stop absorbing the nutrition, it starts building up, and then we start to see a higher ppm. Now, on the other side of that, if your pH is phenomenal, 6.4, 6.5, and your potting soil 6.6 even, I'm super happy with, and the plants all look yellow, but you're not giving me your parts per million, it's probably telling me that they're eating everything you got, they're super happy with the pH range, the roots are super excited, but you're not giving enough food. So you're probably at 150 to 250 parts per million in your potting soil for your slurry test. So ideally, ppm and pH meter are going to be critical.
So if you're starting out and you get some pH tape, and that's all you have, and then you're fine forever until you see an issue, and then you realize you may have to do something, or how does it go?
And then you go, the next thing is because the pH tape's going to keep you in a, I don't care if you're 6.3 or 6.4 or 6.6, I really don't. Are you 6? Great. Are you 5? You're bad. You're 7? You're probably running into problems.
Okay.
So I would start with litmus paper. It's $12. It's like 150 tests. That's 150 feeds or 75 feeds for Bob because he's going to probably test twice. Then you go out and you buy a ppm meter, a total dissolved meter. Those are cheap. Get a Milwaukee one. Get a whatever. It's 2 probes measuring salinity. So it's a cheap meter. You can afford cheap meters. They're worthy. I don't buy a cheap pH pen because it's far more technical, far more scientific. If you buy a cheap one, you're going to get cheap results. So buy a nice pH pen when you're ready. But until then, litmus paper is going to give you the good sense of where you're at.
And then the next thing you would go is ppm, and you might see issues with that would lead you to alkalinity?
Well, if I know my pH and my ppms are all off, then the alkalinity, there's something going on there. But usually, if I know you're at 7.9 pH water, and I can usually deduct from the information you're giving me, as long as I have 2 of the 3 meters, I can definitely help. Alkalinity meter is great for the guy who's just super nerdy, who already bought a Brix meter and is looking at a Callahan soil meter. It's a great tool, but most people will use it 3 to 4 times and then they're good because they know their water source. Nobody's testing their alkalinity runoff because why would you? It doesn't matter at that point. Mm-hmm. And I guess if you really got it, you could do slurry tests. When you're done, you squeeze it out and test the alkalinity of your slurry. But for the most part, once you get your alkalinity figured out in your water source, that's your weapon. Now you have to figure out, how do I want to steer this weapon?
So you get some litmus paper, you get pH tape, and you start going. And unless you have problems or you really want to dial it in somewhere down the road, you're pretty much good to go. But when you see issues, that's when you have to start worrying about this?
No, you should have a concern and start reaching out and having that conversation, because I think it's a simple test. And generally, most people I deal with currently that has the low alkalinity issue, or they think their water's fine and they've been watering with distilled this, that, and the other, but their pH is a 5.7 and their slurry's mid-bloom, that's easy. That's that limestone additive. We're in process of registering that product right now, which this country's so backward. It's bad. Get me fucking started there, but it's so back-asswards that just getting this stuff registered because of the calcium limestone that's in it, the nightmares that they don't want calcium and stuff for whatever reason. Probably just make you unhealthy and die of cancer because God forbid you were healthy with calcium in your damn system. So because of that, it's a nightmare to get these forms of calcium registered. They're limestone. We drive on them all day. It's the dumbest shit ever. However, we're going to release this product that's going to it's going to be a bloom booster for the sake of registrations. It's going to have the fine ground powdered bone that we use, the pork bone we use. It's going to have a magnesium punch for it, remineralization to it, but it's going to be primarily the alkalinity pack. We're not going to call it alkalinity pack because we can't say that, because that would be a whole other registration nightmare. So it's just going to be a bloom pack with very, very little numbers, about 36% available calcium for us to fix people that have alkalinity issues. And we're sure a lot. And I've tested this out now with a handful of growers. Pig being my very first guy, we dialed in his 3rd grow with this. The results are beyond what we expected. We're blown away. Now it's in 3 different farms on a large scale and numerous farms on 1 pound, 2 pound scales to see if we can correct the home growers' distilled water, the home growers' RO water. And so far, we're seeing no drifts in pH. We're seeing aggressive feeding. The biggest problem is if your pH starts drifting and your alkalinity shot, which you can't really tell because you can't test your soil for that pH being so low, the plants take a hiccup and your yield suffers. And the quality still seems to stick around, and it's definitely a decent product, but you definitely lose your yield from that. And if you're only catching up in bloom every time, you're going to leave nectar eventually because your yields are never there. You're going to listen to your moron friend who's like, man, you can't get a yield from there. Well, that guy never asked the question why he couldn't get a yield. And I bet you his water sucks. He's using RO, he's using distilled, he's not putting any calcium in. There's something going on that we can help you dial that in, but you have to ask us some questions on what is my water doing to me and how do I fix that?
So you're walking uphill with this the whole way. It's just that you start to really notice it once you get into bloom. As it slowly fades away on you.
Well, they're in autopilot. They're happy with the greening. They're happy with the bushiness and the vigor of the plant. And then second week, they just slow down. And then you're like, maybe I should check my slurry or something. And then you do, and then you reach out to me in a panic because it's 5.7. It's because it's been drifting for 2 weeks. But if we know that your water is bad, like in Michigan, no worries for most of those people. Matter of fact, if you ever buy Camaro in Michigan, you have bad water and something else went wrong, or you're not on the east side of the state or the northern side, those guys will never need Camaro or this boom pack, because their water has it built in so high that most of those guys have to cut it with distilled just to make it usable. But it's amazing. Like Thug Pug can just drive his plants like there's no tomorrow because it's Olympus Up built into his water. Everybody else is going to sit out there, and if you take a slurry 5 days before you go into bloom, and it shows you 6.2, you better put that stuff in right now. It's going to take 6 to 10 days. It's going to start releasing, and it's going to start buffering it the other way. But if you don't, you wait 2 more weeks, you're going to be at 5.5, 5.7. It's going to take you 10 to 14 days to get you back into range. That's 2 weeks of bloom gone. So there's your yield. It's in correcting for 2 weeks. But if you can test your slurry that week before you know you're going to switch to bloom, add in that limestone, right? And any limestone, as long as it's limestone, not dolomitic lime, not gypsum lime, but limestone calcium carbonate. Buy it from anybody, any source, do not care. Don't buy the fine powdered. It releases too fast. You'll have to reapply often. The bigger pellets, it's a slower release. And it only releases if your water is acidic enough to actually rip it out of the soil. So putting down that pelleted stuff is ideal. It acts as drainage, and as the water passes it, it dissolves the calcium carbonate off of that and turns it into alkalinity.
Okay, if we're going to stop there, what's next? What should I be doing? What should we be doing to put this together? What's the big picture? Don't know yet?
First, you gotta face the camera and go, I'm here,
hey there,
to the damn show, because that's what you're gonna do anyway. And second, you need to tell everybody that your heart is still beating, you're still around, you've been here, we've been trying to figure out our new mode, and what we really want to do is kind of recreate this wheel in a sense. We want to help. We have so many new growers, we have so many new people on board. We also have all of our old pros, all of our old customers that we hold dear and true. We want to be able to give the information that is going to benefit both, but we want to kind of go back and rebuild how nectar is start to finish, A through C, starting with the 3 to 4 part piece, why we add other things in and how to add other things in, and then maybe at the end of each of those episodes coming back with a 2 to 3 questions from the pros, from the old schoolers on, here's the show of ABCD.
Yeah.
Pro tips at the end for the folks that really are staying tuned in for whatever reason, if they ever continue to stay tuned in. But if they would stay tuned in, then we have little Easter eggs at the end of each show that kind of give them that next set of tips.
Have you thought about taking some of these email things you have back and forth and going through the thread of how you worked it out with someone?
I have, and my problem with that is, unless they tell me, hey, use this on your show, I have a very confident, sure. I hold their information in confidence because a lot of these guys are trade secrets. A lot of guys share this with the group, and I'm all for that. Mm-hmm. I will make a mental note, and if you're watching the show and you have a good question or something, and you're asking me and you forgot to answer or ask Bob that question, put in the notes, hey, Scott, feel free to use this on the show. I'd love to hear that and for others to understand it. And I'll start looking at some of my bigger growers who kind of hold that pen tight close to their chest and ask them, hey, mind if I throw this little tidbit out there for these guys, because it's going to help them. And and it's better if I can come with an actual, for instance, rather than hey, I went fishing and my salmons are this big all the time, because they're not. So I want to be able to at least come with real world, real people, and not just the industry dick talk.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
And everybody, beat Bob up. Email him. He's bob@organsonly.com. Let's hear the questions. And we're trying to build question shows. We really are. We like them. We know the customers like them. We sure enjoy being in your grow rooms with you. It sure is fun. Hey, look at that bug over there. Just kidding. You don't have one. You're running nectar. But it's, we want to still be a part of that. And we do enjoy all the camaraderie. We feel like we've built quite this community of just good people all together, and we have a lot of fun doing it.
Okay, so the plan is we're going to get together way more often for viewer questions episodes over the internet, me and Scott. We're going to get that sorted out where we got better quality to that video, and we're going to try to, with you, work through this thing more interactively, more back and forth between us. I think that's a way to go to freshen things up, to really move things forward. So I'll be talking about this episode we just did over the next week, and then on Friday we'll try to have another viewer questions episode based on questions that y'all came up with, based on what we're talking about. I'm going on and on. We're going to do this. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. The OCG Fam Show was pretty good. It happens every day. It's the OCG Fam Show. See you tomorrow.